To honor Jim today without restraint. No fonder man than him, I'll say. Oh no, there ain't. He burst his heart with thirst. He locked forever deep in thought. He was known by Jimbo to his family was a patron saint. Came to honor Jim and celebrate my brother here. Came to ponder him and state he's with us here.
I'm John Hare. I'm president of the board of the Battle of Homestead Foundation. I'm so happy to be back. It's been 18 months since we've been able to meet in person. And I'll tell you a little bit about the programs that we do, but the Pump House was always a central part of that. We're so pleased to be able to work together with the very extended family of Jimbeau Hohman. Jimbo was a dear friend to all of us. We're going to miss him so much. He was a regular at our Wednesday morning breakfasts. Every Wednesday we met at Homestead Eden Park and shared our viewpoints, experiences, programs, activities, and with our extended people organization that couldn't make it that day. Since then, since COVID, obviously, we've been breakfasting on Zoom. Not quite the same, but we've been doing it. Just a reminder that COVID is still around, everyone. I know I don't have to tell you that, so let's just keep that in mind as well and try to do our best to exercise the necessary precautions. Some of you may be asking, why did Jimbo get involved with this organization? What's it about? And let me read to you from how we describe ourselves today. Inspired by the dramatic labor conflict of the 1892 Battle of Homestead, we promote a people's history, empower today's workforce, and build strategies for the future of work. Values are the dignity of work, labor's rich heritage and its pivotal place in our society, community engagement through programs and partnerships, skills development and a prepared workforce for the future, human rights within a robust democracy. And our vision is we will celebrate working class culture, preserve labor's rich heritage, and shape the future of work. Pretty big prescription there for all of us. Jimbo wasn't a guy for big vision so much as looking at what we see, reproducing it through video, telling stories, telling jokes, as we know. And Jimbo first got involved in the Battle of Homestead around 2005. I wasn't there then, but you're going to hear from Billy Young and Charlie McAllister. They'll they'll be able to tell you about that. And I think what brought Jim to the Battle of Homestead was the earnest discussion about tremendous industrial and labor history in our region. Not only that, but the tremendous people's history in response to the problems and challenges that industrial and labor history presented to average working people, families, and communities. In 129 years ago, on July the 6th, right here in this building, the townspeople and working people of Homestead, which was a thriving and very prosperous town, turned out at this very building and led the struggle against barges of scabs, 300 of them coming up the river. They got on the barges, Pinkerton detectives they were called. They were mostly actually college kids looking for a summer gig. And they got on the boat, they were handed a Winchester rifle and a little uniform, and were told to defend the mill. Defend the mill. The townspeople didn't need to defend the mill. They were defending the mill and the workers too. There was a 7-mile barricade around the mill that had been built by the owners, Carnegie and Frick. It was strung with electric lights at the top, the first use of electricity at the time. Why did they keep the people out? They had locked them out because they couldn't agree on a contract with a very strong union. And the union had the full, represented basically the technical people. It had the full support of all the workers, including the mostly immigrant laborers. The conflict here in the Battle of Homestead is very dramatic. When the townspeople turned out, men, women, and children with their shovels and their anger, they prevented the barges from landing. Many Civil War veterans were among the townspeople and the workers, and they had brought some of their weapons with them. There was kind of a standoff, but eventually shots were fired and the battle raged all day. In the end, the detectives on the barges were sitting ducks and couldn't really fight, although they killed 7 townspeople and workers. And the captain of the Pinkerton detectives was wounded and actually carted away, and the barges were kind of abandoned in the river because the tugboat that was pulling the barge took the captain to get medical care. At the end of the day, the Pinkertons surrendered. They were made to walk through a gauntlet of townspeople who told them what they thought of them and knocked them on the head a couple times. And as they came up the bank, and for that day, the workers and the townspeople were victorious in preventing the armed guards to occupy the mill and therefore permit non-working people to come and work there at the mill in place of the striking workers. But that only lasted about 15 days. This short-term victory only lasted about 15 days until what was called the Pennsylvania State Militia, the National Guard, was ordered in. Some 7,000 troops were sent here to Homestead to essentially occupy the mill. Initially, the working people in the Union greeted the militia with actually warm greetings and very much hoped that the militia would assist them in preventing what they regarded as a violation of all that was right, that their jobs would be taken away by people that didn't work in the mill. The governor had different ideas, and essentially the presence of the troops meant that strikebreakers could come, and it took some time, it took several months, but eventually the strike was defeated. Many of the strike leaders were arrested, although none were ever convicted, because juries in Allegheny County were quite sympathetic. The average jury were quite sympathetic to the cause of the working people. It's a long story. I'm not going to tell the whole story. I've probably exceeded my time now. I just want to say that what sparks our interest in this history is that we see the seeds of resistance and hope, and we want to carry on those seeds of resistance and hope, and use that to interpret a lot of our history, the history of average working people and their families. And not only does it help to inform how to look at events today, but also for us to think about what we foresee for the future in terms of work, average working people's lives. Almost all the people working in the mill and the townspeople took seriously the promise in our Constitution: liberty and justice for all. Liberty and justice for all. Unfortunately, the owners of the mill, Andrew Carnegie and his henchman Henry Clay Frick, felt it was their right and their rights only to determine who works, under what conditions they work, and whether or not they would even have the right to sit down and talk and bargain a contract. They thought it was an incredible limitation on their rights as owners of the mill, and actually under property rights, the workers were part of their property. So this is a dynamic that set the tone here for more than 50 years, until finally in the 1930s, under the Roosevelt administration, the United Steelworkers organized and successfully created an organization for the working people, and helped to create the middle class that has existed in our economies really up until about the last decade. So that's the 5-cent version of our history. Today we're here to really talk about Jimbo, and we have a series of speakers that will be talking. I would like to caution folks to maybe turn your phones off if you haven't done that yet. That can be the bad guy. I asked if it was okay to look at the phones, but don't have them on. It's okay to look at the phones if you want to. So on that table, there's some more literature about our organization. There's an explanation of the Battle of Homestead. There's a brochure about the pump house banners, which we couldn't put up today, but Bill Young has made wonderful banners of steel workers from 1892 to the present time, each decade. And you should come and see those when the pump house is open for tours. I know there's lots of memories of Jim, and our first speaker will be Carrie Hohman Lansendorf.
Hello, friends and family. Thank you all so much for being here. It warms my heart to see you all. And I'm already going to go off script with a true confession. Sometimes I would feel sad for my Uncle Jim that he didn't have a life partner or a family of his own. But look at you. Look at you all. This is such a beautiful history. I'm Carrie Hohman Lansendorfer, one of Jimmy's many beloved nieces, and I'd like to share a few words on behalf of my family. My siblings and I owe a debt of gratitude to our dear Uncle Jim for many reasons, but it's fair to say that we may have never existed if it weren't for him. As he told the story, my father Larry, Jim's oldest brother, was in seminary studying for the priesthood when in seeing his baby brother Jimmy, 13 years his junior, he recognized the desire to have a family. He married a woman, my mother, not God, but close. Blessed Imelda, as we like to call her. And 54 grandkids and counting, it's the gift that keeps on giving. Uncle Jimmy told that story as he gave a poignant eulogy at my father's funeral, against priest orders, I might add. And for that, Uncle Jim, we humbly thank you. We are also grateful to our uncle whose wit and charm and command of the English language was so smart, so refreshing, and so much fun. I mean, who didn't have a great time while in his presence? Whether it was at a swanky bar or a restaurant, and he knew all the good places. Enjoying local music or at a family get-together, Uncle Jim was delightful. Conversations on books and old films were always entertaining and enlightening. And don't get me started on politics, though I will say this, his humorous memes helped many of us through a rough 4 years. Amen? I personally have fond memories of meeting him at a club in Shadyside to listen to a jazz band called Catch-22. I loved that I could hang with my unc, share his love for the arts and music, and feel in him a kindred spirit. Another favorite memory is a story he told of me at age 4. Apparently, I climbed up on his lap, crossed my legs, folded my hands, looked him square in the eye, and said, "Let's talk about it." I'm not sure what we actually did talk about, but you can imagine it was either deep and or ridiculously funny. Another favorite memory, then there's this vivid memory from my youth of my dad and him playing chess in our dining room. They were drinking beer, probably Iron City, and they were stacking their empties into a pyramid. I don't remember who the sore loser was that night, but I'm pretty darn sure with the checkmate came a loud and brutal smashing of said pyramid. I'd like to think wherever they are right now, my dad and Jim, that there is a rematch going on and they're having a good time. So many great memories, but I will end it here as I look forward to hearing some of yours. To my brothers and male cousins, I'm sure you had your own special bond with Uncle Jim, but my sisters and the girl cousins never doubted. He loved his nieces to pieces. Cheers to you, Uncle Jimbo.
Let me brief you all on the program. We have some prepared speakers, 5 or 6, and then we have some music, and then we have a toast, and then we have an open session. I didn't turn my phone on. Hang on. Sorry. We'll have some music by at least 2 singing groups here, and then we'll have a toast, and then we'll have an open mic for 15 plus minutes or so for those of you that wish to contribute as well to the legendary stories that will no doubt be told today. And that's what we have in mind, okay? So just so you don't get too anxious like me when you don't know the agenda, okay? All right. I'm really pleased to introduce a longtime friend and a wonderful philosopher, historian, teacher, nature lover, machinist, union steward, and leader, Charlie McCollister. There's nobody like Charlie.
This has been so wonderful to bring the Hohman family, such a magnificent, generous, sweet family, together with the Battle of Homestead family and all the friends that Jimbo made over the years. So my remarks, I've been fighting losing my voice for days now, but I think we'll make it. To Uncle Jim, Jimbeau, handsome Jim, an uncle to us all. Jim and I talked once about his being avuncular, of being uncle-like. He said he'd had a lot of practice at it since he was born the youngest of 6, a surprise package, who doted on the children of his brothers and sisters. The relationship between a child and a mother is straightforward. We are of flesh and blood, and I lived within you. That between father and son is, as Jim said, variously complex. But being an uncle is a gift. Aunts and uncles are on the edge of the nuclear family dynamic. A kind word, a brief encouragement, a wink of complicity, a pearl of wisdom, avuncular. Jim was a masterful uncle, and the world badly needs wise and sympathetic uncles and aunts. Jim was also an uncle for more than a decade to the Battle of Homestead folk gathered together at breakfast. He always arrived early, checked on those around him. He was ever kindly concerned with others, full of humorous anecdotes that were never barbed or hurtful. Always kindly, always perceptive. There was not a mean bone in his body. He did, however, despise meanness in those who were powerful and often wrote sharp letters to the editor. There's a wonderful collection back there on the cruelty of politicians who were indifferent to the struggles and sorrows of ordinary folk. As Shadyside Jim, he was a regular commentator for years on Lynn Cullen's talk radio show. In those far-off times when radio stations thought they needed a liberal voice to balance the yapping and snarling chorus from the right. He dearly loved puns, double entendres, mixed messages. He loved language, he loved literature, but he especially loved movies, the cinema, as he used to say. He was our go-to source for film history with encyclopedic knowledge of Hollywood classics, Italian realism, Spanish, Czech, and French movies. His mother and father, who, as he said, saw something in me, gave him an 8mm movie projector when he was 12 and introduced him to serious movies. He was hooked. He used his movie-making skills to record numerous Battle of Homestead and Pennsylvania labor history events. For many years in this pump house, where we held a dozen or more programs a year, we had no screen, no projector, and no sound system. For the better part of 8 years, Jim was my faithful assistant, Bill Young, in transporting, setting up, and operating the equipment for our programs. Jim's career included many years of graphic design at Pitt, where he specialized in working for the theater, music, and architecture departments. As well as a keen wit, he had a sharp eye. Perhaps it was his Catholic upbringing, which I can appreciate, but Jim was a masterful saloon raconteur, a slinger of bon mot, the guy at the end of the bar with the best stories. He had an endless supply of Winston Churchill quotes, some of which he certainly invented on the spot. I hope his very close friend Bill Young will share some stories from favorite watering holes. There were many, like the Cum Laude, the Union Grill in Oakland, or Duke's in Homestead, as well as tales tall and short from their joint participation in the Society for Creative Anachronism, which Jim described as a swinging bash of cross-millennial hoop-de-doo, where grown men clobbered each other while the ladies sat on the sidelines knitting underpants. The Battle of Homestead organization was organized to commemorate the 1992 centennial of the battle and celebrate the culture and struggles of working peoples in the region. that was so central to the development of modern industrial society, to the history of the labor movement. Many of us came out of the civil rights movement of the 1960s, and we embrace a fundamental duty to fight racism, economic inequality, and political domination. So while we work to tell the stories of working people, we also aspire to create a beloved community that honors the elders while helping the young'uns continue the struggle to create a better world. Community needs aunts and uncles to encourage and support. Jim was an uncle to his family, but he was also an uncle to us, encouraging, tolerating, humor. Like the Battle of Homestead Group, Jim was fierce about learning. He wrote in his memoir of the pandemic about the joy he took in simply driving around town in the last year, down streets he'd never been down before, soaking it up, taking it in, the sheer exhilaration of nothingness. That was Jim. He was fierce about learning, which is why he so despised the arrogance of ignorance and meanness that is increasingly around us in the land we love. Jim pulled you in to share precious nuggets, pearls of wisdom, never to prove how knowledgeable he was, but how interesting life was. He held to the creed that we, the beloved community of which he was a part, hold as well. The point is to learn something, to deepen our knowledge, and then, like a good uncle or aunt, encourage the young to carry on, to keep hope alive. And so to conclude, I want to share his favorite quote by Merlin the Magician from The Once and Future King by T.H. White. You may grow old and trembling in your anatomies. You may lie awake listening to the disorder in your veins. You may miss your only love. You may see the world devastated by evil lunatics, or know your honor trampled in the sewers of baser minds. There's only one thing for it then, to learn. Learn why the world wags and what wags it. That's the only thing which the mind can never exhaust, never alienate, never be tortured by, never fear or distress, and never dream of regretting. Learning is the thing for you and for all of us. Thank you, Jim.
They're illustrated in this brochure that you can see on the table in the back. Bill is a wonderful illustrator. He's close to one of our founding members of the Battle of Homestead. He is the communications director of the Asbestos Workers District, and one of Jim's earliest friends from the Battle of Homestead. So I want to call our friend Bill Young, who has been working with the family on the committee and helping to plan this event. And there he is.
Bear with me, I don't like microphones. Jim was the best of friends. Like half the population east of the Mississippi, I met Jim in a pub. Our friendship lasted half a century. Thank you. Am I doing too loud or quiet? No, you were close. Sometimes he was my teacher, other times he was more like my kid brother. He was an advocate of civil discourse, an eloquent spokesman for the value of knowledge, and a purveyor of goodwill to the world. But you already know that. You may not know about Jim's extraordinary animal magnetism. Gentlemen don't tell, and Jim was a gentleman, but I'm not. Ladies in the room who might be complicit can relax. I'm only here to snitch on my pal Jimbo. Most of you have heard something of the enduring saga of Priscilla the Hun. You can spell Hun with an O, or either one works. Maybe you know part of Priscilla's saga from Jim's memoirs, but I was there. The Society of Creative Anachronism, SCA, is the organization for folks who flee everyday boredom to pre-17th century garb and beat each other over the head with sticks. Naturally, when we heard about this back in 1972, we had to investigate. We and our friends were in early at the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th fencing wars, an annual battle between the East and the Midwest that still continues today. I think they're up around 50. Back then, all you had to do was kind of dress up and show up, and you were in. Imagine, if you will, our Jimbo in tunic and pantyhose tights. Now that's animal magnetism. On a starry night in a camp by a quiet pond, Jim met Priscilla, the 5th century princess with magnificent breastplates. Jim believed they were Chrysler hubcaps. I thought they were Buicks. She waved a bottle of black tire wine and invited Jim into her yurt. That's a tent, not a bodyboard. We don't know if the wine got shaken and stirred, but Jimmy emerged from Priscilla's tent in the morning, pleased as a trencherman after the king's feast. The Dark Ages weren't so gloomy. Maybe for being too raucous, or for being deadly serious, or maybe because the leader of our clan was a rare, audacious female. Wave a hand, Carol, wherever you are. We were 86th out of the local West EA. But it was okay, because fun came in many forms in the 1970s. Speaking of battles, back in the day, I more than once heard Jimbo say this about someone, a bouncer or somebody a little rough around the edges that we knew. Maybe he'd be a good man to have you with in a bar fight. Imagine, if you can, our Jimmy in a bar fight. I can't either. But I recall a disagreement right here in Homestead. Also in the 1970s, a bunch of guys and gals were out on the town one evening. We went first to Walsh's Bar in East Liberty for bluegrass, before bluegrass became popular. We left there and went to the south side for Zorro, or what's the name of it? Where did I lose? I lost it. Oh, okay, we went there for Zorba's on the south side for Mizuki and Uzo. And then we went to the Villa Cafe in Dormont. The Villa was early karaoke, wasn't quite karaoke once, but it was one of the bars that both I and Jimmy frequented before we knew each other. Anyone who could get up and sing terribly or terribly well, depending, accompanied by a chain-smoking piano player named Marion. Two exceptional talents who sometimes sang at the Villa, as well as in bars and under Sunnyside, were George Smalley and Joe Quinlan. George and Joe loved opera, show tunes, singing, and drinking. George was a Nelson Eddy baritone who had performed on Broadway and sang solo roles with the Pittsburgh Opera. His projection could blow the doors off the room. Joe had a radio show, and his beautiful Irish tenor voice brought tears to people's eyes. I knew them because George Smalley was my sister's brother-in-law. Jim knew them because he was a man about town and supported the same bartenders that they did. We were not ready to call it night when we left the Villa. One of our gang was a member of the Russian club here in Homestead, which is next, or was next to present day's Cook's Cafe, and he got us in. Homestead rocked around the clock back then. The club was crowded and busy. A pianist played Chopin. Jimbo explored the room, mingling with the crowd. Along the way, he charmed a husky blonde lady in a black leather motorcycle jacket. Women's Lib was coming on, but this blonde was never a Stepford wife. She didn't ask him, she told him, "I'm taking you home with me tonight." Jimbo did the righteous thing. He ran. In my mind's eye, I still sees Jimbo scrambling around the piano or maybe a pool table with the blonde hot on his heels trying to grab him by his collar or something. Fortunately or not, we'll never know, Jimbo escaped with his virtue intact and made it home to his carriage house on Fifth Avenue. I don't think we went to the carriage house that night, but it was usual for people to end up there after pub crawling, a movie or a play or some other adventure. Good conversations and fun went long into the night, sometimes not ending until Jim looked out the windows and said, in his best W.C. Field fashion, "I see the rosy fingers of dawn creeping over the horizon." I miss Jimbo. When Charlie reported the sad news, my eyes seeped down my face all the evening. If reincarnation is true, I don't care if Jimbo comes back looking like Rosie O'Donnell, Donald Trump, or Donald Duck. I just hope he carries back. He missed Bloomsday this year. Thank you.
You know, our county executive wants to tear down the airport midterm terminal and build another one. And why is never quite clear to many of us, because we already have a wonderful we already have a wonderful initial terminal at our airport. It happened to have been designed by a good friend of Jimbo, Tassos, and he's here.
2 years ago, Jim decided to throw a party celebrating his 80th year. And that's the first time I got to see and meet the Hohman clan. And there was a bunch of them. We had drinks, and we had dinner, and when that was over, a glass clinked, and Jim rose to speak. All of us anticipated at least an amusing talk, but the contrary occurred. Jim held a ring up, a gold ring, and he spoke about the strength and the circle of family that goes around a ring. He spoke of friendship and how it encompasses you, supports you, makes your life worthwhile. He loved his family, and the ring represented the way that family was held together, a ring of love. When he spoke of friendship, it made me realize and talk about the way we met at a restaurant where I was having dinner with friends. We had a group that met every Tuesday. We called it Tuesday at Mornings. I didn't know Jim then, but at the adjacent table, I heard the waitress giggling. And then I heard, "How does a girl like you get to be a girl like you?" Was Cary Grant here? So I turned around quickly and he looked at me and he said, "Well, partner, it's sure good to see you because I'm here at the Chuck Wagon and we're going to eat some tumbleweed soup." I didn't know what to do except I acknowledged his presence. I almost bowed. Then I turned back to my friends and we continued our conversation. But the adjacent table was so close he could hear what we were saying. And before I knew it, he was participating in our conversation. He insinuated himself into our group and into my life. This mischievous, happy man took over. Jim's motto was, no one can drink alone, no one can eat alone, and this Tuesday at Maury's is crap because there are 7 days in the week and I'm available for lunch all 7 days. We began having luncheons first 2 days, then 3 days, and by that time, the whole week was spent having luncheons with Jim. And then around 4 or 5 o'clock, I'm in my office and the phone would ring. Hey, Jimbo here, what are you doing for dinner? I just had lunch with you, Jim. Yeah, but it's dinner time now. So we began having dinner. We had dinners that ended up going to jazz joints, to bars, and the evening was spent with Jim. We would have even had breakfast, except Jim was a late sleeper and I was an early riser. The whole thing is now where we are today. And I felt compelled to write something. I encouraged Jim to do his memoirs, and fortunately, he finished the 2. And I think that was very important. So with your permission, I'm going to read what I feel, what I think, and I think you may recognize the guy I'm going to be talking about. Jimbo belonged to a very special breed. Look around you. If you are fortunate, someone like Jim might speak to you as he did to me. Rare, unique, special. I was lucky because he found me and asked for nothing. He came empty-handed, offering himself. Vulnerable, open, grasping life's incredible journey. He perceived our magic world. He enriched every event. With food and drink in hand, every day was a celebration. He lived for the moment, every moment. He needed people to share, to prod, to challenge. He exaggerated and improvised, told stories, myths, politics, movies, history, jazz, songs. Suddenly he might fall silent in quiet reverie. Then, abruptly, eyes ablaze with drink in hand, he'd break into wild personal imitations. Like a tide, he carried the day. He filled the void with laughter. He knew the pain of loss and exuberance of gain. He had all the parts, memories, mistakes, victories, defeat, love, death, and deeper discoveries of spirit, where his true center was family, love, friendship.
Is Scott Smith in the room tonight? Hi, Scott. We're not going to be able to have Paul Axton speak to us from Liverpool, but he's nominated you to do it, and we know your English accent will be great.
I'm a friend of Jim's as well. I actually got to know Jim. I'm not in the theater crowd, but my next door neighbor was a theater director. He used to throw huge parties. Jim was always there. So that's how I knew Jim. So this is Paul Axton. Paul lives in Liverpool, England. He was part of the Pals gang and did the breakfast and all that sort of thing. Says, what can I say about James P. Hohman that has not already been said by those who knew him so much better than I? You see, I feel a little embarrassed to be speaking at all, yet whenever I attended breakfast with the Pump House gang, I always made for that seat next to Jim. Somehow we just seemed to share a view of the world. I'm guessing that we met about 20 years ago, possibly a little more. There was an immediate rapport. Raised in a blue-collar town in the working-class world, but not himself an industrial worker, Jim gave the impression of aspiring to the life of bon vivant, but without the bow tie. Mixing his Italian and French, pronouncing both in a slightly eccentric way, he would always say to me, "Paolo, I do admire your chapeau." A man who always gave the impression that touring the Riviera in an open-top Bugatti, slipping in and out of a Somerset Maugham novel would have suited him fine. But beneath the witty avuncular man, term seems to keep coming up here, the much-loved Uncle Jim was a serious mind, both knowledgeable and intolerant of willful ignorance and mean-spiritedness. To quote Charlie McCollister, Jim Hohman did not have a mean bone in his body. The head teacher of an English grammar school once wrote in his report on an applicant to my university department head, said his head is constantly in the newspaper, but he seems to know little of world affairs. Of the young Jim Hohman, he surely would have said his head is constantly in the newspapers, yet he seems to know everything of world affairs. Jim was a voracious hunter-gatherer of information, but with a wonderful nose for the absurd, the offbeat, the inconsequential things that make life bearable. A self-taught philosopher. I wonder how much that came from being the youngest by a significant margin of 6 children. His mother, Catherine Schneider, must surely have been his greatest influence. Her grandchildren here today could no doubt tell us that. On April 20th, 2006, arriving in Pittsburgh Airport, the rental car company could only offer me a Lincoln Town Car, huge, white, and terrifying to park next to a granite curb. I drove into Homestead for breakfast at the old Eaton Park opposite Kyoto's and must have looked like the boss of a local narcotics gang. Walking in, I heard a shout, "Hey Paul, where's your driver?" Guess who? The master of the one-line quip, Jim. I took the car back immediately for a downgrade. To be unable to cross the ocean, as I would certainly have done to celebrate him, is a real deprivation. You can form strong bonds of friendship even though you meet only 4 or 5 times once a year. And it would be a very cold fish you could not warm to Jim after even a cursory acquaintance. To appreciate Jim's qualities, you have to only hear his voice in your head. There was a characteristic way in which he enunciated words. They often had quotation marks around them. He was a performer without being a show-off. He wanted to make sure you got the point, but I don't remember him laughing at his own jokes. A poker face or perhaps a slight smile was all that was needed. He frequently embarrassed me with his introductions to friends by not quite getting the details right, but always in my favor. The last few emails he sent days before he died had aerial views of my house in New Brighton and Merseyside, near Liverpool. Jim often found software that turned Google Maps into a bird's eye view, and he was delighted to describe my neighborhood for me with a red dot right over my house. If only he could have visited in person, you can imagine the fun of taking him touring Merseyside, as he called it. Having taught American urban history for many years, immigrant families in industrial towns are irresistibly fascinating. And in the weeks since Jim died, I've been exploring the Holmans, the Wackers, the Wehagens, the Hergenroders of Sharpsburg and Braddock. It's been lovely to share some of that history with Kathy, but the person I most want to share with is Jim. Always too late. I doubt that he ever visited the German towns where his great-grandparents were born. Strangely, I knew Olpe near the Ruhr Valley 50 years ago, and 10 years ago my daughter was married in Darmstadt, which was criminally destroyed by the RAF on 9/11/1944. Next time I visit my grandsons and cousins in Germany, I'd like to go to those places and think that son of German Catholic Sharpsburg who became a friend. Meanwhile, whilst Jim enjoys hotcakes in some celestial Eaton Park, breakfast for the rest of us will never be the same again.
Thank you, Paul. If you're on the Zoom, we appreciate it. Not quite the same as hearing your wonderful accent, though. There is another Zoom speechifier that has sent in their speech, a good friend of Jimbo's, Charles Schotter. I'm going to read what Charles wanted to say. Jim was a friend of more than 50 years. He had great gifts as an artist, as we all know, and others are more qualified to speak to his talent. Our initial connection was through the Millard Fillmore Society, a group that was not so much organized as coalesced around our mutual friend, the late Frank A. Griffith. One of our principal objectives was to honor one of our country's most distinguished mediocre presidents. Jim was often appointed as the acting secretary. Under the bylaws, the secretary was forbidden to take the minutes, and if any minutes were inadvertently taken, he or she had the solemn responsibility of losing them. As a corollary, under the Articles of Non-Incorporation, bylaws were forbidden. Jim took his non-duty so seriously and unperformed them with such diligence that in the annals of the Millard Fillmore Society, there are no annals. Our principal order of business was to order lunch, usually at the Pit Tavern. The melted cheese and ham was my invariable choice. Once, encouraged by an enthusiastic review in the Post-Gazette, we went to John and Mary's Iron and Glass Bar in Lawrenceville, which, as all good natives know, is pronounced Lawrenceville. When asked why they weren't listed in the phone book, the proprietor said, "Who needs it? You got a number in a phone book and people keep calling in that." Jim was a great jazz enthusiast, and as a member of the Millard Fillmore subcommittee, went to hear Oscar Peterson at Carnegie Hall, New York City in 1977. Who made that trip? Frank and Jim and I and Bob Wyeth. Am I right? I don't know. I know I'm missing someone. Later, after I moved to Los Angeles, a similar subcommittee flew out of my way to attend the first Stan Kenton Memorial Tribute Festival, and Jim recorded extensive videos. Hang on to those videos. They are historic documents now. What I will remember most about Jim was his immense generosity. If you asked him for a favor, as I sometimes did, it became his first priority. So I am going to miss him. Goodbye, my friend. That's from Charles Schotter. Thank you, Charles. Talk about Jim's videos very briefly, but not now. Now it's time to hear some music from Mike Stout and Jason Kendall. We're privileged to hear an original song that Mike penned for his friend and comrade, Jimbeau Hohman.
In the Battle of Homestead Foundation, and I'm sure his family too, we all had unique, special relationships with Jim, and mine was no different. Jim, we had a arrival order at breakfast every Wednesday at Eden Park. And first always would be Rosemary would come in, and she actually would arrange all the tables and get everything set for everybody. And then Jimbo would come. And when Jim would come, he'd go sit usually up near the front on the side, and he'd always have a New York Times newspaper or some magazine he was studying or reading. And then whenever I would arrive, it was just like being back in the steel mill. I worked in the Homestead steel mill. And when we were in the maintenance department in the 160-inch plate mill, we had what we called safety meetings before the shift started. And workers would show up 5, 10 minutes, 15 minutes before the shift started. And we had what we called a jag session. Everybody would jag each other. And Jim was the best jagging partner I ever had. In fact, I liked it when he didn't have something to say, because when he had something to say, it was always a dissertation. It wasn't just 1 or 2 sentences. It was always, like, I wished I had Jim When I was in the 5th grade and I had to write a 500-word composition on the inside of a ping pong ball, Jim could do it. We would always banter back and forth for 5 or 10 minutes. Rose would be our audience. And even when Jim had nothing to say, he would always give me his Rodney Dangerfield, "Hey, what are you picking on Jimbo for, huh?" He always had something to say. The whole time I knew Jim, which was somewhere between 15 and 20 years, he never ever called me Mike or Michael one time. He always called me Miguel. And the only time he didn't call me Miguel was there was about a year, I believe it was around 2009, my good friend and probably one of the most famous actors to come out of the city of Pittsburgh, Wally Jamal, was doing a play on Delaney, Martin Delaney. And Wally I was so gracious because I not only got to sing, but Wally let me play General Sherman. And so for a year, I got to be called General every time I walked into the pump house breakfast. Jim, he'd go, "Hey, here comes the General." But I want everybody here to know that I love Jim. Writing this song for him literally took me less than a half an hour. I didn't even have to think about it. And Bill Young sent me an email about a week ago. And Bill's my second most favorite comedian in the Battle of Homestead. And Bill said in his email, he said, "Mike," he said, "this is going to be a hell of a wake. Too bad Jim's not going to be there." And I answered back and I said, "Jim is going to be here."
Came to honor Jim today with smiles and tears. Came to ponder him and say his spirit's here. Laughter, always chasing after humor. He was no gloom and doomer, joking, always poking up funny bone with his subtle cheer. Came with heavy hearts to raise my brother gone. Do our parts and sing his praise with ode and song. His wit, it would never quit. He'd read with voracious need. His letters to the editors always challenging what's wrong. Let's remember Jim outright, all the work he amassed. Let his embers brim so for the working class. Artist, one of the best and smartest. Knowledge, he was a walk-in college. History was no mystery to this friend of the working class. To honor Jim today without restraint. No fonder man Oh no, there ain't. He burst his heart with hers. He locked forever deep in thought. He was known by Jimbo to his family was a patron saint. Came to honor Jim and celebrate my brother here. Came to ponder him and state he's with us here. Give it up for Jason and Kendall, one of the baddest musicians
From the family musicians, Leah, Mark, and Nicholas Hohman. Come on up.
Hey, hi. Hey, everyone. I'm Mark Hohman. I'm Larry's oldest. Larry being Jimmy's oldest. It's my daughter Leah, my son Nicholas, and we would have been here anyway, of course, but we're here in this capacity because Uncle Jim was he was kind of a fan of the band. That is, he was a regular at shows that we did if they were in his range, which being based in the city, there were a lot of shows, and it was always an honor when I would see Uncle Jimmy come through the doors, because Uncle Jim was, since I can remember, he was just really cool. And, and that's what I wanted to be, and that's why I learned the guitar. And when I would see Uncle Jimmy coming to see us, it felt good. It felt good. So this is just to say thanks for him doing it and for him being who he was.
Draw my eyes across the castle top rock. Had a laugh when I realized what I saw. Like a vision, you brought time to stop. To remember our names carved in those rocks. Won't you come with me one more time? High above that Pennsylvania line, to the highest point that we can climb. Like a vine, I'll hold you tight. Kiss me lightly under heavy skies. I swear I'll let you go, but not tonight. I'm too weak to be the one to say goodbye, goodbye.
You're so quiet, you're so pale. I shake despite the fire you put in me. But you leave when I can feel your heartbeat. I know you laugh, you can see me.
Kiss me lightly under heavy skies. I swear I'll let you go, but not tonight. I'm too weak to be the one to say I swear I'll let you know, but not tonight. I'm too weak to be the one to say goodbye, goodbye.
Terrific. If you haven't had an agent yet, talk to me. If people still have some liquid in front of them, now's the time for a toast. And our toast mistress is Rosemary Trump. Foremost labor leader in our region, Rosemary Trump.
You know, during this pandemic, Jim was our most enthusiastic Zoom member to attend our breakfast and dessert meetings. He would tune in early and stay late. He particularly enjoyed exchanging worldviews with our Liverpool, England brother, Paul Axton, who you heard from earlier. Jim even made sure this unique moment of history was captured by insisting on doing a screenshot of the attendees in April of 2020, very early in the pandemic. He sent it to us via email with the following tongue-in-cheek bar. Fellow pumpsters, here is the group photo from last week's Zoom Fest. For the most part, everyone took the photo cue except you, Mark Fallon, who seemed more interested in getting your morning jolt of joe. At least I think it was coffee. Personally, I find Bloody Marys work for me. Then he put in parentheses, LOL, JH. To expand on that observation, I would like to share that Jim's and my favorite part of the Battle of Homestead programs given here at the Pump House was for us at the end of the presentations to retire up the street and over the tracks to Duke's Bar with fellow Pump House gang members to share a toast with a cold brewski in hand. And of course, we would engage in an informal discussion of the evening's presentation that would eventually evolve into rowdy patter about current local, national, and international happenings and events. So, Jim, in keeping with that tradition, I ask that each of us raise our glass to toast Brother James Jimbeau Hohman at this time. A toast to you, Jim, for giving us fond memories, happy times, laughter, and insight into the troubles of our time. Cheers and solidarity, my good friend, Jim. Salute. Hear, hear to Jim. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosemary. We are now at the part where we have an open mic for those that would like to say a few words about Jimbo. One will be actor Wally Jamal, who's here with us. Can others that would like to speak perhaps raise their hands so we can have a sense of who else? I'm sorry.
Hi.
Okay.
I better warn you right now, I will not speak as eloquently as many of the speakers that have come before me. But I will speak with the love I have for Jim. I came to Pittsburgh roughly 20 years ago, and I think of all times in my life since then that were important and meaningful, and Jim was there. And one of those first things that I always think about was that when I first got here, every Sunday, I would go to the VFW. I would play pool with Jim, and his brother Larry, and his brother Paul. Those are the best times of my life. We would sit there, 25 cents a game, and play pool. And I don't know if you knew, Paul was suffering from Alzheimer's. And so I got to be Paul's partner all the time. Because and I remember Paul he would line up a shot and we were playing 8-ball, which stripes and solids. And we would be stripes and he'd be shooting solid. I said, Paul, that's not our ball. And Paul would say, doesn't matter, I can make this shot. It's a double bang. And he would do it. He would make that shot, and Jimmy and Larry would be that much ahead of us. And these three brothers, their interaction together was just so wonderful to watch. I mean, you cannot know three more gentler men, more conscientious, but I remember Larry told Paul one time he couldn't make that shot, and Paul pulled back his pull cue like this, and Larry pulled back his pull cue, and Jimmy stood back and said, no, and I said, guys, let's talk about this. And those days in VFW were the best days of my life. But the other thing was with Jimmy. He would call me up, and the first night he called me up and said, we're going to the Savoy. It's a little restaurant, high-end in Pittsburgh. And I showed up in nice slacks and a dress shirt. And boy, was I underdressed. And so the next time, Jimmy would ask me, he said, all right, we're going out, we're going with Tasso, and I expect you to up your game a little bit, right? And showed up. It was like you had to be dressed to the nines. You had to have the suit, had to come, because you were going to a fancy place and you were going to make an impression. You were there to be there, and in a middle-aged man's life, when you get to this point where you have something to step up to, you have to step up to, all right? And it was so nice. It was like, it's like prom twice a week. I mean, you have to dress up and show. And so I would look forward to Tuesday nights at Savoy, jazz night, live jazz. And it was like, you had to wear your best suit. You had to look damn good because you were there to represent. And I said, Jimmy made a mark on my life. And I think most of the people here, Jimmy made a hell of a mark on all your lives too. And I love him. And I miss him. Thank you.
I'm pleased to introduce another friend of Jimbo's, 2018 Pittsburgh Post-Gazette Actor of the Year, Wally Jamal. Wally.
You get your book, Bill? Hey, Battle of Homestead Foundation. Oh my goodness, every time I mention those three words, Battle of Homestead Foundation, I think the Battle of Homestead family. Because in 2009, I was performing a one-man show that I wrote and performed with no funding whatsoever. And very few people came. And when people ask me, people say, well, I wanted to go, I wanted to come see your show. I say, the right people came. And that made me feel better. And two of the right people that came were Mike Stout and Charlie McAllister. And they appreciated my efforts in Pittsburgh history, that they drew me in, they brought me into the Battle of Homestead Foundation. But the reason that I'm here today mainly is because I go back further with Jimbeau Hohman than anybody in the Battle of Homestead Foundation. Before I got involved with these guys, I was still trying to do history, Black history, American history, Pittsburgh history. And I was doing a play about Robert Smalls. It was the first play that I had ever written. And I wrote it on yellow tablet paper. I had no computer. I was destitute, but I was driven by this history and the importance of getting it out there. And thank you. And I was interviewed at the local public access television station, BCTV, in 2001 to talk about it. And another panelist on this show was Jimbeau. And we hit it off so quickly because Jim does impressions and I did impressions. And while we're trying to talk about this thing, we're trading impressions like Frank Gorshin and Rich Little. He'd do Rodney and I would, hey, I'll tell you, I get no respect around here. What are you kidding? I'll tell you. You know, he would do one. He'd do, hey, Pilgrim, we're gonna move out and move that cattle out. Yeah, hear me? Yeah, and we just hit it off like a couple of school kids. But then we got really into the history part of this show we were on. And I was talking about this slave, Robert Smalls, who became a hero of the Civil War. And when I talked about the aspects of his life, I saw Jim just rapidly feeling. He was feeling everything that I was explaining about this man's life. He was empathic, he was gentle, and he was sympathetic. And after that interview, after we all jokes, laughs and jokes aside, he pulled me to the side. And he said, Wally, I love your history, I love what you're doing, but I gotta say, if I was born black, I think I'd be a terrorist. And I said, chill. And 8 years later, I was embraced by Charlie and Mike and invited to one of the Battle of Homestead Foundation breakfasts at McDonald's here in Homestead. Oh, I was born here in Homestead, by the way, Homestead Hospital. But when they brought me in and I went to that first Wednesday morning breakfast, there was Jim. Wally! Jim! And it's just ever since, Jim has been just so awesome to me. And I gotta say, all I'm picturing right now is Jimbeau and Dr. David Demarest sitting back, chilling, having a scotch, having a martini, and saying, would you look at all these guys? So thank you for hearing me. Thank you, Hohman family. You guys are so awesome. And Jim, Hohman is so much.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak at this time?
It was a wonderful time. So, at the end of the night comes, Jim goes out, oh, wait, no more keg. Look in the fridge. Oh, wait, there's nothing in here. Oh, well, I guess it's time to go home. Had a great time. See y'all later. Too much fun. We'll definitely be missed. Thank you.
I have a lot of great memories of Jim in the short time that I've been a member of the Battle of Homestead Foundation. But one of my favorite memories is every year we do a Christmas fundraiser show. And Jason and many other musicians, Mike, the whole gang, all perform. And Rosemary, we had a big table and Jim was in the front. And I'm so happy we have this preserved for posterity purposes on video. And I was watching the monitor, and all of a sudden on stage, who appears on stage? But Jim. And I'm looking and I'm thinking, why is Jim on stage? So I heard him and ran out. And I said, Jim, come over here. And he said, do you think they put the bathrooms a little bit closer to his face?
Jimmy's great niece, Rosemary's granddaughter. My only vivid memory of Jimmy is going to dinner sometime in the fall of 2014 and sitting there riveted as I explained what the amygdala was in the brain to him and how shocked he was that I knew what it was. And that's something that I will never forget. And he was like, you know what that is? That's amazing. Tell me more. What does it do? And so that's the only time we really got together and had a long conversation, but I appreciated that from him. So thank you very much.
Brother, his name was Jack. What I remember the most about Uncle Jim is how cool he was. And something came up probably about a year and a half ago. I'm a remixer producer for major record labels, and I do dance music, which is very different for a lot of people, except for Uncle Jim. One night on a Saturday night at 1 o'clock in the morning, I get a phone call from Uncle Jim. I'm like, oh no, what's wrong? He says, because he had his new car and he was driving, I'm listening to Sirius XM and BPM and I just heard one of your songs and I love this station. Tell me more about it. And I was like, what? And of course he shared with me a lot of memories about the family in the last month before his death and provided a lot of his artwork, which is at 122, which is where he was born. We all loved Uncle Jim.
So all good things must come to an end, and Carrie and Kathy and others who helped to plan. It was a wonderful gathering. There is some information Charlie would like to tell us about some books that are available back there. Charlie?
Yeah, the point of Pittsburgh really, in many ways, was the foundation of the Battle of Homestead. Putting it together, getting it out, getting it printed. It's the story of Pittsburgh from the beginning, from dirt, from geology, geography, the Indians, and then the workers. It's the story of the Indians and the workers that ends with Bill Mazeroski's home run. You're welcome to take them. Just if you want to make a contribution to the Battle of Homestead, all the money will go to the Battle of Homestead Foundation. But I think if you love Pittsburgh, you'll find the book very interesting and you'll learn some things you probably never knew before.
Where are they, Charlie?
They're in the back. They're in the back right there. Yeah.
Can I make one more? Mm-hmm. Sorry. I just wanted to say in the corner there's a sketchbook that Jimmy did when he was very young and in school, and there's a lot of empty pages. And there are a lot of outstanding artists here just to represent. And we would love, as a family, if you could take some time and pencil something, if you could sketch something in that sketchbook, it would mean the world to us. And thank you very much.